So I want to give everybody an update on Trump's condition. To do that here, I'm going to go to Australia's state news agency. I feel like they do a better job and they're more objective in their coverage. So this is going to give you the timeline of events of Trump getting COVID, what's happened in the fallout, what's going on right now. Let's take a look, and then we'll come back, and I'll put the cherry on top for you.
The president's hospitalisation is really playing out a bit like the rest of his presidency, with two different narratives as to his condition right now. First, we had the team of doctors, all in white coats, coming out of the Walter Reed Military Hospital behind me to brief the press with a very rosy picture of the president's condition, saying that he was not on oxygen, was not needing oxygen at this time, that he was doing well, that they were cautiously optimistic, and that they believed that he was headed in the right direction. Let's hear some of what Sean Connolly, the president's physician, had to say to the press there.
I recommended we bring the president up to Walter Reed as a precautionary measure to provide state-of-the-art monitoring and any care that he may need. Just 72 hours into the diagnosis now, the first week of COVID, and in particular days 7 to 10, are the most critical in determining the likely course of this illness.
We have monitored his cardiac function, his kidney function, his liver function. All of those are normal. And the president this morning is not on oxygen, not having difficulty breathing or walking around the White House medical unit upstairs.
But then a matter of minutes later, there came a quote from an anonymous source painting a very different picture. It said, quote, "The president's vitals over the last 24 hours were very concerning, and the next 48 hours will be critical in terms of his care. We're still not on a clear path to a full recovery." And just to give you a bit of a sense as to where that quote came from, it was delivered to the pool of White House reporters that were there at the hospital. Now, we don't know exactly who said it, but we do know that the president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, was seen on camera and heard just a few moments earlier saying that he wanted to have a chat to reporters, a briefing chat, a sort of background briefing chat, which usually means not sourced. So, as I say, I don't know for sure that it was Mark Meadows, but it was given to that pool of reporters. So, as I say, competing narratives as to what condition the president's in, and that just leaves a whole lot of confusion.
It certainly does, and all this confusion, of course, comes at a time when more senior Republicans have now tested positive, David. Do we even know how this outbreak started?
We don't know for sure, and look, we may never know for sure, but yes, you're right, more Republican figures are testing positive. Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, is one of them. He was President Trump's briefer and advisor for the debate on Tuesday night here, American time, and was speaking very regularly with the president at close quarters and not wearing a mask, and neither was the president often. So he's one who's got coronavirus. There's now 3 Republican senators who have the virus as well. And it's starting to look like more and more that the Rose Garden event at the White House a week ago, when President Trump announced his nominee for the Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett, certainly played a significant part, or perhaps was the sort of super spreader event that's passed it on everywhere. What's clear is that this has spread quite significantly through the White House itself, and many of the other mechanisms that come into contact with the White House. Things are still running smoothly in terms of the wheels of government and the like, but this is an incredibly messy situation, and layered on top of it, this lack of clear information. And another one I should just mention is that doctor of the president's had said in that briefing very clearly that it was 72 hours since the president actually had his diagnosis. Now, that would put his infection happening and the diagnosis, the detection of that infection, just about 13 and a half hours after the debate. Now, that was then cleared up a little bit later by the White House, and the doctor said that he misspoke, but he was reading off notes at the time when he said 72 hours. So look, it's all very confusing. If that is true, that it was 72 hours, then the president, it seems, would have been knowingly going to several campaign events, meeting with big donors and the like, knowing that he had coronavirus. Now, as I say, that's been cleared up by the White House, but it's all pretty messy.
So the most concerning facts: Trump needed oxygen, and he needed it multiple times. His blood oxygen level plummeted at 2 separate times. The doctor said, it was never in like the low 80s or anything, which means it was probably in the high 80s, which means it was a very dangerous situation, because anytime you get below 94%, it's dangerous. And if he was in the high 80s, that's well below 94%. So remember, he's 74 years old. He's obese. That's really, really not good. And, I spoke about this previously, but if the real turning point in this virus is around day 9, and if he's already well before day 9 and having extreme symptoms, that could be a really bad sign. Now, it's also possible that he already had the worst of his symptoms and he's going to bounce back, because some people are even asymptomatic. Clearly he's not asymptomatic, but, he could already have experienced the worst. But what we're learning now is, so he did a motorcade, this little joyride in a hermetically sealed Suburban with Secret Service agents, and he did this. Apparently, he was telling the doctors, I'm going to be sent back to the White House. That's what you're going to do. You're going to send me back. And they refused. They're like, no, you can't go back yet, because they know that until day 9 or 10, you can't, like, he could take a turn for the worse like that. You might feel fine now, but you could go off a cliff. This is something that doctors have seen quite a bit with COVID. So they're basically like, no, we're not going to release you. And so the compromise was, he said, I need to project strength. I'm going to ride around outside and wave at my supporters who are gathering outside. And so, listen, that Suburban is protected from chemical attacks, which means there's zero fresh air that gets in there, which means, his people may have been wearing masks, but I don't know if they were wearing goggles. If they weren't wearing goggles, they're probably going to get the virus, because the virus can get in your eyes as much as it can get in your nose or your mouth. So he may have given like 3 people COVID to do a little show here to let everybody know, I'm doing great, I'm doing wonderful. Now, there were rumors, he might be released today. If he's released today, you can take this to the bank. He is forcing his doctors to release him. That's what's happening. Because talking to my friend, who is one of the top guys at an ICU in New York City, which was the epicenter of the outbreak, he told me it would be absolutely mental to send Trump home now. You have to keep him there longer to monitor him to make sure. Because yes, they got a lot of stuff they could do medically at the White House, not nearly enough. Also, he should be in a negative pressure room. And they probably don't have one of those at the White House. Also, they probably would want the ability to intubate him if need be. They probably don't have that at the White House. They have oxygen, but that they have the ability to intubate? No. So there's a bunch of reasons. Also, he could just keep spreading it a bunch of different places if he's, out of the hospital. There's a million reasons to keep him at the hospital. Again, he's 74 and obese. So if doctors release him, they're not choosing. It's Trump forcing them. And when the president of the United States tells you you're doing something, usually people say, okay, I guess I got to do it. He's pulling rank on me. So it's not a doctor-patient dynamic as much as it's a, you got somebody who's dominant and he's bossing everybody else around, and they might just follow through with it. So if he gets released, that is not good. That is not good. He needs to stay in the hospital. They need to be able to monitor him for a longer amount of time. Everything is a mess behind the scenes. There are people, like, there's a super spreader in Republican circles, and a million of these Republican senators, 3 or 4 Republican senators have it. Chris Christie has it. People who help with debate prep have it. So now people in the White House who are staffers, some of them have it, and there's no direction, there's no anything. Like, they were like, what do we do? What's the protocol? And apparently last night, they slapped together an email that was like, if you feel symptoms, stay home. So this feeds into the correct narrative that these guys were totally unprepared for COVID. They have no idea what they're doing. And this is just another example of it here. I mean, now Trump has it. He may have been going places with it, knowing he had it, taking a joyride in a hermetically sealed car to give other people COVID as he projects strength. Like, everything about this is insane. It's absolutely insane. So we don't know if he's out of the woods yet, because when you have your blood oxygen level drop twice that low, again, that's not a good sign. The flip side of that is he is obviously getting the best care in the world, period. Like, he's getting the fact that he got the antibody treatment, even though it's not approved yet, there's no downside. Like, it either works or it doesn't, but there's no downside if it doesn't, which is one of the reasons why they were totally cool with greenlighting it. But yeah, the idea is you get those antibodies in you somehow, an antibody cocktail. So that alone should really help. But then, the stuff that they used, namely, there was a steroid and there's remdesivir. There's evidence that shows that this stuff is helpful. But the interesting caveat, though, is they're really hitting everything hard up front. And there are a lot of doctors who say you should want to hold off, especially for the steroid that they used, that you only do that for somebody who's like late stage COVID and who really needs help now. And if you use that steroid too early, it's not as effective. So that would be, again, mixed signals, as in like, well, how far along are we in this and how bad is it really? Because the way that they're treating him like he's a late stage COVID patient who's like really in trouble. I mean, his doctors would know more than I would, but that is a little concerning. So who knows what's going to happen, but it's an absolute mess. And again, I'll repeat it. If they let him go, if he gets out of the hospital today or tomorrow or any time before like 9 days, he's forcing them to let him go. Because really, they should want to keep him there to monitor him, to make sure he doesn't go off a cliff, because that can easily happen with COVID. That's that crucial day. 9 days is the turning point. And a lot of that has to do with what's called a cytokine storm, which is the virus messes you up. The virus messes you up. But at a certain point, your immune system kicks into overdrive. And when your immune system kicks into overdrive, that gives you horrendous symptoms. And that's what's called a cytokine storm. Like, a lot of people died from Spanish flu because they were young and healthy. And the reason they died is because their immune systems almost worked too well and overwhelmed them, and they died from their immune response. That's one of the issues with COVID as well. And so you want to keep him in there till day 9 to make sure that if he has a cytokine storm, you manage the cytokine storm. So I don't know, man. It's all a mess, but he's probably seeing the polls now, and he's like, I got to get out of here. So we'll keep giving you updates on it. We don't really know how sick he is because there's contradictory information. The doctors say one thing, and then the anonymous White House officials say other things. Some say it's horrendous. Some say it's like, hey, it's not that bad. He's already feeling better, and he'll be released soon. So I don't know, but this is quite a season finale to 2020, is it not?